growing up in Los Angeles as an 18-year-old boy, I was very excited to serve a mission for the church, and I'd kind of always planned to do that. And my older sister had married a returned missionary who had gone to France, and then my oldest sister had married a returned missionary who'd gone to Mexico. So one spoke Spanish and one spoke French. And so I was very excited to go and serve as a missionary. And my grandfather had gone on a mission to Denmark, and my great-grandfather was from Denmark. So my mom had always hoped that I was going to go to Denmark on a mission. That's kind of what I always thought. I kind of always felt in my heart that I was going to go back to my homeland and I was going to be a missionary in Denmark. And so when I turn in my papers, they always say, where do you want to go? But I didn't put that because I knew that God wanted me to go to Denmark because that's where my heritage was. So I didn't put anything. I just put I'd go wherever I was going to go. But I knew that that was going to be Denmark. So I turned in my mission papers, and the day came and my mission call came in the mail, and that was very exciting. So my parents, I wasn't home, and they got that in the mail. And so they had a cassette recorder. That was our technology of the day. And they were going to record the excitement of me opening my mission call. So they called all the family, and we came around. And so I came home from work that night at about 6 o'clock. And they said, hey, your mission call came, and we were all very excited. So here was the whole family. We were sitting in the living room, and so they turned on the cassette recorder, and they said, okay, Bobby, open your mission call. So I opened up my mission call. I was very excited. I knew it was going to be Denmark, but I read these words: you are hereby called to labor in the Minneapolis mission. This was in 1976, and in 1975. And it's funny to listen to the tape because there was just dead silence. Because everyone in my family thought I was going to go to Denmark. That's what we'd been planning on. And so it's funny to listen to the tape because I read that and there's just silence. And then you hear my sister say, well, that's really exciting. And everyone's going, oh, well, that's great. We're so excited for you. And so that just made it worse, that nobody knew what to say. And so my sister, she says, well, you'll be back there for all of the events of 1776. And then we realized that none of us knew where Minnesota was. I think we thought it was next to Washington, D.C., which it's not. So we actually had to pull out a map and see where the state of Minnesota was. It's in the northeast. It's up just below Canada by the Great Lakes. I don't think I'd ever really heard of the name of Minnesota before. And so I was kind of disappointed. I was kind of devastated. But I had faith in God, and I thought if this is where God wants me to go, I'm going to go. But in the back of my mind, I thought this is a mistake, and somehow this mistake is going to be corrected. And so the time came, and I went to Salt Lake, and I went to the mission home, fully confident that at some point they were going to say, oh, wait, we've made a mistake. This young man's supposed to go to Denmark. Well, I went to the mission home, and none of that happened, and next thing I knew, I was on a plane flying for Minnesota. So I realized that this was the way it was going to be, and I was going to make the best of it, even though it wasn't Denmark. So I served in the Minnesota-Minneapolis mission, which was a delightful place. Way too cold there. I don't know why people live there. It's way too cold in the winter, but most delightful people, and I had wonderful companions. My mission president was Douglas Collister, and he was a wonderful mission president. And I had wonderful companions there, and we met a lot of really wonderful people. For part of my mission, I had an opportunity to serve as a tour guide in Nauvoo, Illinois. So for 6 months of my mission, I was in Nauvoo, which is a historical spot for the LDS Church. That's where Joseph Smith started the city and was the mayor of the city. And so during the day, I would take tours through the visitor center. In the evening, I would work in the homes, the blacksmith shop, the Browning home, the Scoville Bakery. And it was really fun. And the other missionaries, there were 18 of us who came from Minnesota and Indiana, and I loved them. I loved them all, and we just had great experiences. And we would walk around the town at night from our houses. We lived in the houses in Nauvoo, which was a small town, and I could feel the spirit of that town. And I could feel I had a testimony of Joseph Smith, the prophet. It was a very strong testimony. I learned to love Joseph Smith in that town. And In the nights that we didn't, we'd work in the visitor center during the day, and at night half of us would go work in the homes. The other half would go, and we were in a softball league and we played basketball. Now that wasn't bad either, I got to tell you. It was a lot of fun. We'd usually have a double header. We'd play insurance companies. They'd kill us the first game, and then while they were drinking beer, they would be drunk, and we'd always win the second game. So it was a lot of fun, and we made very good friends with them. After I was in Nauvoo, I got transferred back to my last area was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the town of Winnetonka and Wayzata. It was kind of a rich community there. Delightful, wonderful people. And one of the people that I met there was a man who'd married a member of the ward, and his name was Compton Khan. And he was not from the United States. He was a Hindu, but he'd married an LDS girl, and he was attending school there at the University of Minnesota. And he was very receptive to the missionary discussions. And so we taught him the missionary discussions, and he progressed really well. And just before I left, he was baptized. The bishop performed the baptism, but it was one of the great days of my life. I didn't see a lot of people get baptized into the church during my mission, but Compton Khan was one of them, and he had a very strong testimony. And so I left my mission feeling really good about my service and really good about having this convert who had joined the church. And so I didn't hear from him for years and years and years. We didn't stay in touch. We didn't have social media back then. And so it was 35 years later, and I was in my office at Brigham Young University, and there was a knock on the door, and the door opened, and here was Compton Khan. And even though it was 35 years later, I could recognize him. And he said, "Are you Elder Walls?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "I'm Compton Khan." I said, "Yeah, I recognize you." And he said, "Can I talk with you for a few minutes?" And I said, "Sure, please come in." He said, I saw your name up on the marquee, and I thought, I wonder if that is the same Elder Walls that served in Minnesota." And I said, "Well, yeah, yes, it is." And he said, "I wanted to just thank you for your service." He said, "Because I know that it must have been a sacrifice for you to go to Minnesota and to endure the winters there and to knock on doors and to teach me the doctrines of Christ." And he said, "I just want to thank you for your sacrifice." He said, "My wife and I were married in the temple." He said, "We have 3 children. Our oldest son is serving a mission. Our 2 daughters are students at Brigham Young University, and that's why I'm here." He said, "I currently work as a temple worker in the Minneapolis temple." And he said, I'm just really delighted to have the chance to thank you for the great thing that you brought to my life." That was one of the greatest feelings I've ever had, to realize that my sacrifice and my service as a missionary had led this man and his entire family to a life filled with the gospel of Jesus Christ in their lives. So, I've realized, and I knew this long before then, it was great to see him, but I knew that it doesn't really matter where you serve your mission. It doesn't matter if it's Denmark or if it's Mexico or France. The important thing is that you take the doctrine of Christ and you share that with anyone that you come in contact with. And when you do and they're able to accept it, it does change their lives.